We know that Cliff Kingsbury was hired by the Washington Commanders, strangely enough, as their offensive coordinator. And now we've seen some rumors circulating that the Washington Commanders, who have the number 2 overall pick in the draft this year, could actually move up to 1 and take Caleb Williams. Now, the Bears have already come out and said they would need a historic haul to send Caleb Williams, or basically Caleb Williams, to send that number 1 pick out. And apparently the Commanders are willing to deal it. It would probably take 2-3 first rounders, a couple seconds. Of course, you would switch picks from 1 to 2 if you're the Bears, and from 2 to 1 if you're the Commanders. And, Cliff Kingsbury was just at USC. I don't understand how a guy of Kingsbury's stature can continue to underperform on big stages and have so much hype and credibility thrown his way. Oh, he had the tutelage with Patrick Mahomes. Oh, he was tied to Caleb Williams. Kind of funny that both of those guys are being compared. But Kingsbury was a failure at the NFL level. I'm sorry, but he was, at least as a head coach. So how is he getting this sort of ties to Caleb Williams? I get it. He was just at USC. I get that. But it doesn't make any sense to me how a guy not performing to the standard of what he should be, especially given his position and the teams that he's with and the players that are around him, and gets this type of hype. I mean, the NFL doesn't cease to amaze me at times either. It really doesn't. But again, the Bears would have to take a historic offer to move off of the number 1 overall pick, because the Bears are more likely than not drafting Caleb Williams at number 1 overall. The Commanders will apparently approach the Bears about their first overall pick. And, Magic Johnson came out, new ownership here for the Washington Commanders, of course, and he told new offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury that they'd, quote, do as much as we possibly can to get the quarterback that you want. He was a senior analyst at USC, which, of course, Caleb Williams was there as well. Cliff also has a track record of accepting jobs to places where he knows either his preferred choice at quarterback is already in place, or that team has a high likelihood of obtaining that player. That's why he took the Cardinals job in 2019, and they eventually selected Kyler Murray. At the time, the Cardinals owned the first overall pick. After getting fired by the Cardinals, Cliff Kingsbury eventually took the job at USC for the chance to work with Caleb Williams. This story would then take a crazy shift. And it's just the mantra that Cliff Kingsbury has around him. And look, if you're able to pull that off with the Cardinals in 2019, and people think that you're tying a best generational prospect to Caleb Williams back to you, then so be it. We saw his name in the Las Vegas Raiders offensive coordinator job, but he knows that it's not a place that he would really want to coach. The talent is there in terms of Devontae Adams, in terms of Josh Jacobs. Obviously they got Max Crosby on the defensive side as well, but more players, not more players than actually are not very talented over there with Las Vegas. In talking to Washington, the sense I got is that they're not inclined to give up whatever it's going to take to get up to number 1, for the exact reason that Carolina did go up last year. They see what it's like. I'll be surprised if Washington trades up to number 1. That's what Adam Schefter said. The Bears got a historic offer last year, of course, when they had the Carolina Panthers trade up and give them all the assets for Bryce Young. But a real question of, what would Caleb Williams to the Washington Commanders actually do for this franchise? Well, it would give them an offensive presence for sure, because as I previously said on one of the recent shows, the Commanders have not had a top 15 offense in terms of yards or points per game since 2017, when Kirk Cousins was their quarterback, and he was for the 4th straight year after replacing RG3, who was going into his 3rd year. They haven't had a top 10 offense since a couple of years before that, in 2015, when it was the 2nd year that Kirk Cousins had been taken over for Robert Griffin III. Of course, you go into Um, you go into 2016, they were 12th in yards. They were third. They were 12th in points, third in yards. But after that, nothing outside of the top, nothing above the top 15. It's all been 16th and below, including even um, what was it? 2019, they were 32nd in points, 31st in yards when they had Case Keenum at the helm. So the offense has not been good. And that's no question, right? Caleb Williams coming in, he would give them that offensive presence. He would give them that franchise quarterback, that cornerstone of their offense type of vibe, because we know the comparisons that Caleb Williams is getting to other players and especially to Patrick Mahomes. We understand that he's one of the best generational prospects since a Andrew Luck, since a Trevor Lawrence, since a Kyler Murray, since even a potential Baker Mayfield. He has got that type of hype around him. I didn't want to ruin y'all's ears with that, but man, I had to clear that out. That was that was rough. If y'all are watching, you know what I'm talking about. But this would just do a lot for Washington. The offensive presence is something that they desperately need because this has been a defensively driven team for some time now, even though last year they were 32nd in points, 32nd in yards. The year before they were 7 in points, third in yards. 2 years before they were 4th in points, second in yards. So we know they are more strong on the defensive side of the ball than they are on the offensive side of the ball. And bringing in Caleb Williams would change everything. You get a franchise quarterback. You get a guy who can come in and create on all levels. You get a guy who's going to remake that offensive position. And you get your best quarterback since RG3 probably, when they took RG3 number 1 overall back in 2012, when RG3 played 2 successful seasons and then his knee was horribly injured. And, he was really mishandled by the respectfully Redskins at that point. He shouldn't have even been out on that field in that playoff game against the Packers, but things happen. And RG3, unfortunately, was never, ever, ever the same. Caleb Williams would be the best quarterback since RG3 for the Washington Commanders. And that's not necessarily saying much because when you go back and you look at, okay, you've got Kirk Cousins, Alex Smith, Case Keenum, Taylor Heineke, Sam Howell. That's what you've been putting up with. To rebound with a Caleb Williams would be everything. I don't know if I'm here to say that I'm tying Cliff Kingsbury directly to the Caleb Williams sweepstakes. But when did Washington actually last have a superstar who made this franchise good or exciting? I mean, yes, there was RG3. There was a little stint of when Donovan McNabb came over. You had a Deshaun Jackson. There was a Pierre Garcon. There was an Alfred Morris. There were some of those guys that were over here. There was a Roy Haleu. We remember when him and Robert Griffin III were, kind of collaborating. We remember Clinton Portis. I mean, but before that, what are we looking at? What are we really doing here in terms of superstar power? Of course, there's been Santana Moss, but I mean, since 2010, when Santana Moss left, yeah, you had a couple years of RG3. Okay, there's Terry McLaurin as well, a little bit of Brian Robinson, but no like elite, head turning, team changing, offensive prevailing superstar. And that's what the Washington Commanders need, honestly. That is what they need in order to get this team back where it needs to go. Because again, we are in an offensively driven league. We are in a league where you have to have offensive prowess. You have to have offensive players. And moving up to 1, getting Caleb Williams, getting that franchise quarterback, getting that cornerstone of an offense would really, really change things up for this team here.